Hey Emily, did you just cross the country with a gun without a license?
Today we're talking about the federal safe passage provision contained in the Firearm Owners Protection Act. We got this question from the folks over at Facebook. Make sure you stay tuned to the end of this episode for an important note on how gun-unfriendly states treat this important federal protection. Before we get rolling, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. Well, I think, Richard, we start out by where does this law live and how did this come about?
So the federal safe passage provision lives in 18 U.S.C. 926A. And the idea is it's to protect gun owners when traveling, across the United States. The United States is a complete patchwork of laws, and they can vary from state to state, county to county, and sometimes even city to city. And to make our lives just a little bit easier, the federal legislature thought, hey, it would be a good idea if we added some kind of element of uniformity so that folks can travel without getting in trouble. Now, something that we have to talk about, it's really down to three key elements when we're talking about the safe passage provision. And if you're missing just one of the three elements, you do not get the protection. So we're going to go through each of those one by one, starting with legal start and legal finish. You want to give us a rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we wouldn't have to worry about any of this if we had nationwide reciprocity, which we always hope we're going to get, but right now seems like a pipe dream. So this is something you really, really want to pay attention to. Legal start and legal finish is maybe the thing that gets most people in trouble, frankly, because you have to be able to legally possess the firearm in the state you're leaving from. So that's probably your home state. You probably are good with that information. But you need to be sure that the state you're ending in is a state where you can possess firearms as well. So if you're heading from, let's say, Florida to New York, you probably can't have that handgun in the state of New York, which means you don't get the protection in any unfriendly state in the meantime. Whereas if you're going from Florida to Maine, you get to pass through any of those states that you might be worried about, Massachusetts, New York, etc., with that federal protection because you can legally possess that handgun both in your beginning state and your ending state.
The second critical element is how the firearm is actually transported. And the guidance that we have is that it needs to be unloaded, locked up, encased, in the trunk, or inaccessible. So what does that look like? Your firearm's unloaded, it's placed in a case, maybe a hard-sided container, it's closed and locked, and it's placed in the trunk of your vehicle. Now, what if your vehicle doesn't have a trunk? Well, the law gives us some leeway here. It can be in the passenger compartment, but it has to be inaccessible. But it's important to note, the law specifically does not allow the center console or glove box. So unloaded, in case, locked up in the trunk, or inaccessible, not in the center console, not in the glove box. And now let's talk about the third element, Emily, which is traveling. Can you give us a rundown of traveling?
Well, I'll try, Richard. The problem with traveling is it's not well defined in any, not in statute and not in any case law that we've seen. It seems to be just a case-by-case basis that the courts are looking at this, and they haven't given us a solid definition. So our best advice is, first of all, the statute says you have to not cease traveling in order to maintain this federal protection. And our best advice there is don't stop. Don't stop for anything other than a restroom break, to stop for gas, anything that isn't directly related to getting yourself through that gun-unfriendly state is not good. Don't stop to take a nap on the side of the road.
Yeah.
There is a convicted felon made in the state of New Jersey for doing just that, because when he stopped for that nap in his cross-country travel, he ceased traveling. So when you are in that state is going to be unfriendly to your firearm possession, get through it as quickly as possible. You might be tired, you might be ready for a break, get out of that state, and then that you're probably in much safer waters if you do have to stop.
And this is kind of the pro tip. And if you're stuck around, you're going to be at quite an advantage here, because we have to talk about how gun-unfriendly states are treating the safe passage provision of the Firearm Owners Protection Act. They don't give it a lot of credence. And so what we see in our practice is folks who are traveling through these gun-unfriendly states, think the West Coast, think Illinois, think the Northeast, they are using it as a defense to prosecution. Most states will, you'd think would treat it as a bar to prosecution. Hey, this person met all the elements, we're not going to prosecute them, but they treat it as a defense to prosecution. And what does that mean? That means getting charged with that New York or New Jersey felony and raising this protection at your trial. So it doesn't keep you from getting arrested, put through the system, having to mount a defense. And at the end of the day, if you meet all these criteria, the law says that you should have the protection of the safe passage provision. But these gun-unfriendly states, they don't give it a lot of credence. So if it's critical that you make it to your destination, you don't want to be a test case. That's something to strongly consider. They have just made it very, very difficult. They don't respect the Second Amendment. They don't want you bringing guns there. And they're going to, flex the muscle of the state to tell you just that.
Yeah, and imagine just logistically, you get arrested in the state of New York. You've done everything right. You know that you're not going to be convicted of this firearm possession offense because you obeyed federal law, and yet you got to spend the money to bond out. You've got to fly back to the state of New York once a month to hit your court dates for, Richard, how long? A year, maybe more. The wheels of justice turn very slowly. It is treating it as an affirmative defense is essentially a way for them to say, don't use the federal law, don't come here. It really is a slap in the face to the Second Amendment. So be ultra cautious.
Well, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please keep questions and comments coming in the section below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.